Join the Ungovernables. No filters, no apologies. This season, we're cracking open Uniswap governance. Welcome to a new episode of the Ungovernable podcast.
Gentlemen,
what is going on?
GM. Getty, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us, for having me.
So Getty, someone once said that you were actually Satoshi Nakamoto. What do you say to that? First question.
Oh, it's Hal Finney. Everyone knows it's Hal Finney.
No. All jokes aside, Getty, we're super excited to have you here today. What is a few things that you want everybody to know about you?
Yeah, gosh, we've been in the industry for a long time over here. Oku's coming up on a little over 2 years of being launched. We got a few more months to go here. But myself and my co-founder Eddie, we've been in the space now for like 8 years. We came into the weeds back in the 2017 run, and then started working on the prop trading side for about 3.5 years. Took a real likening to DeFi, got very heavy into the compound ecosystem early on, and have stuck around since. It's like, one of the best industries to be in. I couldn't imagine really working anywhere else.
Right on. So give us the rundown on Oku, GFX, and the relationship to Uniswap.
Yeah. So the quick recap, then I'll give some more information, is that essentially about 4 years ago, I started doing compound governance. And for a lot of folks know that there's a lot of overlap between delegates over a compound and Uniswap. And I got heavy into that. And one of the larger token holders over there said, hey, you should come over and do Uniswap governance as well. Like Uniswap is about to launch, it's on-chain governance. Like, you've been doing a good job. Come over there. We'll send you some votes. I'm like, yeah, why not? Yeah, hell yeah. And this was, I want to say this was like 4 years ago at this point, I think, and get a stake of uni votes. And we just start commenting on proposals, and very quickly we're like, our whole MO with governance and everything we do as a company has always been like, well, if there's something that we want to have done, can someone else do it? And if no one else is going to do it, we should probably just be the ones to do it. And that's how we kind of came to be through our governance side of the business. And then also with Oku as well, where we've scaled up over time to being the top delegate within Uniswap by the number of proposals passed. Some of the, pretty much all the most significant proposals have been from our team. Similar story at other DAOs as well. And then about 2 years ago, the Uniswap Foundation was kind enough to give us a grant, or award us with a grant through our hard work, and they knew the caliber of our team to go out and build a whole new user experience for Uniswap V3. And then since then, we've taken Uniswap now to a little over 24 new chains. We really wanted to make sure that what happened with Uniswap V2, I use as a cautionary tale, and one that I'm perpetually trying to avoid now. When Uniswap V2 launched, it went to one chain and one chain only, and that was Ethereum. And then we had a bunch of new chains launched, and then it never expanded. And next thing you know, we now have 3-4 dozen Uniswap forks that are massive, that will run in identical code. And we're constantly playing this dual game of maintaining our king position that Uniswap has, while also trying to innovate, while also trying to make sure that on new chains, Uniswap is getting some early market share on and being, the dominant DEX as well. So a lot of surface area over here that only really touches the very tip of the iceberg, but we're busy folks, and we're having a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah, you guys really are making a name, and a lot of people kind of view Oku now as one of the DAO front ends, essentially. And I know that's not something that you've coined, and that's not necessarily something that we're going to coin, but will you speak a little bit more in your own voice, and no apologies, like the intro said? What kind of a relationship does the DAO have with Oku?
I mean, I think we're kind of like the first major application that came about and said, rather than writing smart contracts and trying to build UI, that we're going to say, hey, there's these beautiful protocols already written, right? Uniswap is the largest and most thoroughly used DEX in the whole space. One team shouldn't be responsible for doing all of the UI work there. That's kind of silly. Let's really try to find ways to level up Uniswap, but as far as the usage goes, through UI UX. The reason why Coinbase and Binance and these major centralized exchanges are getting used is not because that they don't have a DeFi protocol attached to it. It's because their darn UI UX is just so much better. And so our hope is that with Uniswap DAO we have over the last 2 years and other organizations, that we can come in and build really new great UX from the ground up, build businesses around it, and really modernize the space. Everything has been so focused on protocols and infrastructure for the last 7-8 years that it's really silly. And at the same time, we're now kind of getting a chance to expand into Morpho as well. This just got announced right before the end of the year. We got a grant from the Morpho ecosystem where we're going to have a very similar relationship with them, where we're going to have the ability to work very closely with core members of their team and the DAO and the delegates over there and say, how can we expand Morpho to new chains, just like with Uniswap? And we're really excited to bring these two things together and have Borrowland and Uniswap inside of Oku. So our relationship with Uniswap DAO is fantastic. It's 4 years on. I think it's like really hard to have such a great relationship with the DAO. It's obviously dynamic, people come and go, but ultimately we feel like we're in a great spot, and we're really excited about Uniswap V4 and UniChain and many of the things to come in the Uniswap ecosystem and just the greater DeFi ecosystem over the next year and here in 2025.
Definitely wanting to touch on the UniChain and the V4 stuff, but before we dive into that, what would you say? And again, this is on the record, yet it is also off the record, of course. But what would you like more out of the DAO? If you could have the DAO support you in more ways, what would those ways be?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the fundamental issues of the Uniswap DAO and pretty much every DAO we've ever participated in is that you don't have enough of the actual token holders participating in the DAO. And this really makes it difficult sometimes to get folks to see what needs to happen because they're not shareholders and they don't have the skin in the game. And as much as I love most of the Uniswap delegates, most of the delegates don't possess stakes in the Uniswap DAO. And even though our team doesn't hold millions and millions of dollars of Uniswap token, we have a lot more skin in the game than most delegates because we have put ourselves so closely to the DAO and to the protocol and spend so much time trying to grow Uniswap's new ecosystems. I would really like if folks noticed that the number one thing that the Uniswap DAO has that it is not using is its treasury. We're in this amazing position where we have an asset that is worth a great deal, and we have a great deal of it in the treasury, and very little of it gets put to use. And so I was very excited when you guys put up your proposal to come in and say, like, let's do some marketing initiatives, like ask for a very small portion of it. And I think it's a fantastic experiment, and I think it's going to really bring dividends to that. We need more experimentation. We need more open-mindedness for our delegates. We need more folks posting crazy ideas. And for every single person that denies an idea, I think should be expected to present another idea that is at least of the same quality, or if not better, if they're going to go down, around shooting down ideas. So I'm very happy to see these two most recent proposals by Sonic and Celo get approved. I think they're like actually some of the better proposals we've seen from chains in recent time. So I'm glad that although there was some opposition there, that those both got across the line.
No, that's incredible. I'm kind of wondering too, like touching on the treasury real quick, like if you the keys of the kingdom and kind of full control of the DAO, just hypothetically, what would you use that treasury for? How would you use it?
Yeah, I mean, I think first off, I would think it's really important to frame that the treasury that the DAO has access to really should be viewed as like dilution on existing uni token holders. So it's not like free money. We can't just go sell like billions of dollars this token. There's a lot of crazy ideas that have been thrown around. I think not enough of them have made it to the forums. I'm in part to blame as I have a lot of those crazy ideas and I haven't taken the time to write them all. The business model of Uniswap today is around LPs and supporting LPs. A lot of folks think we're like a DEX and that we exist to support swappers, and that's just not the case. Like we're really here to like make LPs make money, and then hopefully we can take a cut of the money that they're making. I really think the DAO is severely underinvested. It's really underinvesting in LP infrastructure and needs to fundamentally think about how we're supporting LPs to make more money on the Uniswap protocol, such that we can also then, as the DAO and the protocol, take a fee alongside of that. And all the talk that we've had for the last several years has really just been around, let's just turn on fees. I get it. I'm like the number one person who's like championing that we should turn on fees, but we also need to find ways and new fundamental ways to support LPs. And like in particular, if I had to, as you said, the keys to the kingdom there, I would be unlocking $5, $10, $20 million, allocating that to a bunch of different teams to say, let's go build LP infrastructure. Let's go incentivize the top trading firms in crypto to come on here. Let's start incentivizing the top new trading firms to come on and participate in DeFi who aren't participating in DeFi, as a lot of folks find it to be difficult. Because the nature of market making, which is what an LP is a professional game. As much as we want to make it retail friendly, that's just not what's going to happen. It's going to be a professional game. We should get the professionals in here. If we can get more liquidity in, more liquidity is going to lead to a lot more market share for Uniswap. And also, if we can, I think my dual track here would be is if we can get some tranches of Uni allocated towards bringing Uniswap into more traditional markets, that'd be great. Bringing equities, commodities on a chain for me has always been a huge focus. That's our pipe dream over here with Oku's 5 years from now. You open up Oku, forget about the coins. You see everything that's inside the S&P 500 that you can trade, all the global major commodities. That to me is like the democratization of finance. Anyone can trade these things. Everyone can invest in these things, get out from their local fiat currencies. That's like the end goal I want to get to. And frankly, the DAO has not done a good enough job of making progress towards that goal. A few other like fun ideas that have been tossed around is like, I think bringing it back to the treasury here, if you have this huge treasury, how do we leverage it? Borrow lend is a fantastic thing. Like maybe Uniswap should start its own borrow lend protocol. I think we would do a fantastic job of that if we so wanted to do. Similar to how like Curve has done it. We could take a bit of the thesis that they have there, do very different execution, but at least the thesis. And some people have even floated getting into the bridging game, which I think like you don't necessarily need to get in the bridging game. You can just partner with someone who's in bridging game or buy one of the existing bridges and roll them up into Uniswap. I think there's a lot of opportunity here, and we just need to take some risk and expand and treat Uniswap like a startup. And for whatever reason, folks don't have that mentality.
I love that. So essentially, a couple key points. Just want to make sure I hit this and reiterate a little bit. So to really tackle that institutional level, really bringing institutions on board to Uniswap, leveraging that treasury to help them incentivize.
Not even institutions necessarily. Like we just need trading firms on here. There's very few professional people who are quoting Uniswap positions on here. And I actually have friends, as you could imagine, been in the Uniswap ecosystem a while, who have built sophisticated trading algorithms on top of Uniswap that were doing fantastic jobs in market making. They tried to go raise capital on their strategies and no one would fund them. And it's just like, gosh, the DAO should just funded that. We want these folks and we want the sort of talent that's working at the major hedge funds and trading firms to be on Uniswap doing that stuff. Like that'd be fantastic.
You almost want to support the ecosystem that's supporting you, right? Like if this is the foundation, really enabling those building on top of you, so that way they can have success, right? Exactly. It's just like the iPhone with the App Store. When apps became super popular, the iPhone started to even dominate even more.
Yeah, exactly. And sure, people complain about like app developers will complain saying, oh, Apple takes 30%, but also they did just enable like you to make lots and lots and lots of money. I think there's a lot of app developers who are very happy that they can be included in the Apple ecosystem and have that sort of distribution. If we can make new tooling and make it easier for LPs to make money, they will have no problem paying the DAO a few bucks for that tooling.
Yeah, I love that. Wanted to touch a little bit more on the fee aspect, because you said the fee switch and talking about that, but you also said that there might be a few other ways to enable LPs. Did you have any of those ideas that you want to share here, or happy to I mean, to talk through those?
I come from a traditional market making background. Myself and my co-founder, like that's our first 3.5 years of professional experience in the crypto industry was working for a Chicago prop trading firm that was both traditional on the crypto side and in traditional assets. We did what was delta neutral trading, lots of high frequency stuff, lots of things in DeFi, but we traded across 14 major exchanges, everything in DeFi, everything under the sun. There's very few trading firms. We left the firm almost 4 years ago. There's very few firms who have come about in the short term and have built new infrastructure. And most of them, if they are coming out and they are new firms, they are not coming into DeFi and they're not building new infrastructure because, as they say, which I think is generally fair of them, is, hey, it's like 10 times easier for them to go plug into a centralized exchange and integrate their API and do high frequency trading over there and quoting and market making than it is on DeFi. Like that infrastructure just doesn't exist in DeFi. And some folks are starting to work on it, but no one's really done it well enough that they can bring trading firms online here and that they can start using Uniswap like a centralized exchange, which is really silly because like we have, Barbersham and their new Aura blockchains, like Corn, 100 millisecond block times. Cheap fees. Like you can use this like a regular centralized exchange at this point. It's just a matter of time for someone to build that infrastructure. So that's something like our team has spent like a decent amount of time thinking about if that's something we want to enter. We're very consumer focused. So the professional angle is not necessarily something we want to go into, but hey, if we had the time and the capital, I would happily do it. It's just a matter of, can you monetize that in the short term? It's a lot easier to see how the DAO holistically can make money off of that and building that infrastructure than like that one-off functionality as a business. It's a lot harder to monetize.
Yeah, and it seems like the extreme ownership mentality that you guys have as well, right? Like if nobody else is going to build it, we're going to go out there and do it.
Yeah, I mean, in my mind, like that should have been what I just described should have been 3 years ago. There's no reasons why I shouldn't have built 3 years ago. I don't know why no one has. And then I bet you if I go write a proposal on it tomorrow on the forums and ask for like $500,000 to do it, then like 12 different people will be like, this is insane. Me and my band of 3 guys in fill in the blank country could have done it for half that price, you know? So and like
So
that's what kind of what the state of DAO is, unfortunately.
yeah, why do you think that, from your perspective, why do you think that is?
Capital allocation is really hard. Building teams is really hard. I think going into when we started GFX, like I severely underestimated the amount of time I would have to spend, for example, on hiring. Like our team's 19 people. We actually have 5 open positions right now that we're hiring for. So if anyone's interested in joining our wonderful team, come to our website, check out our careers
Shout
page.
out.
But hiring is like, I spend a lot of my time on hiring, a lot of my time building the team, a lot of time then managing the team. And it's that orchestration of talent that is just like really challenging. And then you combine that with like, oh, I actually have a lot of mouths to feed. I have a lot of people that are responsible, folks on the team who have families and such. I got to make sure we build a sustainable business that they can reasonably expect employment, a year from now, 2 years from now, et cetera. That's a really hard thing to do that most people just have never done and will never be exposed to in their lives. I thought I had a decent understanding of going into it, but I'd never done it before. And now I have a much greater, and I'm sure I'll have an even greater understanding of it 3 years from now. I think that's the really hard part is these folks on forums typically don't have any sort of real experience to understand what it means to like build and manage a team and execute on like a larger project. It's just hard. So like on paper, you can see how it might be easy, but it's just really hard.
I think that's the hard part too, is like when you propose something, it seems very narrow and you don't see all the external moving pieces that are almost taken for granted when you're writing a proposal within the forum and trying to get an initiative off the ground, right? There's so much more than what's on paper and what goes through the governance process.
Yeah. And also most of the time when people are opining on a forum proposal, particularly like a project where someone's requesting funding, the majority of the thought goes to, is this thing worth doing? And what is this idea, good or bad? And then once they presumably get over that hurdle, is like, you have to. The amount of attention that's given to like, are these the right people to be doing it, is like zero, essentially. Like there's very little like, let me actually like go figure out if these are the right people doing it. Are they like, does it make sense to allocate them more funds? Like, do they have experience in this? What is the resume? It's like, unfortunately, DeFi, in my mind, from what I've seen in talent, it just isn't really there yet. Now, there's some traditional firms, I'd say like the larger crypto firms in the space, the ones that have been around for 5-6 years, they get it. There's some firms that we do some client facing work for. We did quite a bit of client work through kind of the bear market to sustain our team. And they have like a strong appreciation for the caliber of the work we do. Teams can give us something to do and they're like, Getty will get this done when he says he'll get it done by no ifs, ands, or buts. It comes at a premium, but we'll get it done. And it's just kind of hard to get that across on a forum post, I think, for most folks. It's not at all a problem that is unique to us, but one that we run into often.
Yeah, for sure. The human element is missing, right? You can't see the integrity of the person. You can't see their authenticity.
You just don't know the questions to ask. I mean, that's like the biggest one in my mind is like a lot of people just, how many people have done interviews or like interview people or, try to vet someone. It's like, it's a non-trivial thing. And if you haven't done it before and haven't made mistakes doing it, it's, it's hard to do it.
Also, we've definitely seen that negotiating in public is a massive premium. You have to pay so much extra if you're doing back and forth negotiations on a forum. People are so much less candid with each other. You have to walk on eggshells. It's a messy thing. And I'm sure Getty, you more than 99% of the space has seen that, where it's a grind and you never can negotiate the best deal if you have to do it in public in front of the whole world.
Yeah, I learned a lot about like how to negotiate with DAOs and on forums relative to like how we did business at the trading firm. That was probably like a really like steep learning curve for us, is when we were at the trading firm and we talked about how we would price something and what we would do. There was no negotiation. We would give you, and especially in market making, we would give you our best price first. And if you didn't want it, okay, no hard feelings. And then you come over here and it's like, actually, I need to mark up this proposal like massively because I need to be able to like ratchet it down 3 times in the forum. So that way everyone feels like they got it. It's like much more like almost like buying a house or like bidding on a house. You have to feed into a very different personality and like psyche in order to get to that stuff through. And even then, to your point, and you guys know well, is like a really difficult and arduous process.
It can be. It requires a lot of patience. But on that note, Getty, what do you think about governance as a whole and where it is today, where it was 5 years ago, where it's going to be in 5 years? On-chain governance, is it here to stay? If so, what the heck do we need to change about it? And how can we start that tomorrow?
Yeah, I think it's here to stay. I'm really excited to see. I think a lot of on-chain governance over the last few years has not progressed as much as I had hoped, and in large part due to the fact that a lot of folks felt pressure from the existing administration. The Biden administration and how they handled, and I guess the folks in the DOJ and downstream of them, and in the federal courts, etc. It's been a lot of cases that have made it difficult for the largest token holders to feel like they can come into forums and safely comment and opine and participate in governance without facing liability risk from those actions, for silly liability risk, nothing that actually might make sense. I think that's really slowed down a lot of the progress that would otherwise have happened over the last few years. So I'm particularly really hopeful that we'll see in kind of 25 and certainly in 26 a big kind of shift here where funds feel safe to come in here and comment. The largest token holders feel safe to come in here and comment. And we see a lot more of the actual token holders participating in protocol governance and less so just delegates who don't necessarily have the same incentives and skin in the game. So that in my mind is the biggest of disappointment for the last few years. But then also I think probably the biggest upside going into the next few is that meta change that we're going to see. But on-chain DAOs are here to stay. I think it's a fantastic mechanism. I think it's something that should be adopted by more organizations. The literal kind of translation direct drive that you kind of get from I can just go make a proposal, change a parameter, and it goes live. I mean, that's amazing. That's still one of the coolest things in DeFi in my mind. And you can be a college kid, and I tell folks all the time, because I was that college kid who just went into DeFi with zero reputation and was we should do this, change this massive parameter compound. And then people are I don't know who this guy is, but sounds like a good idea, because at the end of the day, as long as it's a good idea and people agree with you, then they'll go and do it. That's so cool. You can't do that in any other industry. So here to stay for sure. Lots of reform to come.
What would you say is first and most promising use case that we might see in real world governance going on chain?
I think we're going to see companies eventually monetize their point systems, right? Crypto didn't invent points, right? There's plenty of companies that have consumer point programs, and they would love nothing more to get more insight and direction from their own customers about what they should be doing. But they've never really had a good conduit to do this. And I think this is going to be the beginning of having some infrastructure, and it doesn't necessarily need to be full blown on chain, but it will be the similar idea, because there's not something for them to govern it. So it's particular for folks to give feedback with a voting power, essentially being the quantity of points, which is should be related to how much they've consumed a product or use a product. Or I think the other really interesting use case from this is going to be with communities. What I mean by that is physical communities, whether that be a smaller local town community, an HOA, or even a city, folks distributing voting weight to individuals who live in those places and saying, hey, let's as a community kind of do some self-governance and polling almost on what things should happen, using the infrastructure here to have trustless, transparent polling. How cool would it be if someday the WorldCoin guys were or someone adjacent to them was let's I give folks the optionality to upload proof of address when they scan their eyeball, and that way I can be Getty lives in Chicago. He lives in Chicago, so he's gonna get this special Chicago soulbound token. And whenever Chicago votes need to occur or they want to poll the population, then we know this is Getty's identity. He has a Chicago soulbound ID and he's going to vote on this thing. So I think there's lots of different avenues well beyond financial applications for on-chain governance to take hold. Yeah, I mean, those are just kind of two of the bigger ones that I've tossed around in my brain, but yeah, lots of other fun things.
I totally agree. I see that in the near future. One of the points you just made a few minutes back about the token holders feeling more confident participating in DAO governance. Do you think that that's going to be actual overt legislative change, or do you think that's just going to be more of a sentimental thing where people feel more confident because of the administration?
No, I think it's going to be actual legislative change. We need to see a few of the cases that are currently ongoing get struck down or kind of reversed by the federal courts. There's been a couple. Precedence is like a word that's thrown around like a lot, and when it's like not often accurately used. There's been a couple cases that have kind of implied which way something could have happened, and I mean precedent because like oftentimes it'll be like someone settling with someone, and like that doesn't set precedent. It just means like that's the thing that happened. You know, it actually has to like go to court and get adjudicated all the way through to become like a precedent. There's been a few of those that have scared, I think, like the largest token holders in a lot of DAOs to come and participate, and which is why you send all these like delegates. I think it'll be both, but largely speaking, we do need to see like actual legal change in order for folks to get more comfortable about participating.
So speaking of legal change, how are we going to turn the DAO into a revenue generating entity in your mind?
I mean, we've brought up the fee switch proposal ourselves once before, back in, I think it was like May of 23.
Well, okay, wait, hold on. There's kind of, in my opinion, and feel free to shut this down. In my opinion, there's kind of two different conversations going on, and I'm not going to name drop anybody, but in conversations that we have had, that many people have had many conversations. Sure. In this context, I think there's two different conversations. One is what happens when a DAO starts to weaponize its treasury and earn revenue, just as a DAO, like money coming into reserves, money coming back into treasury, what have you, right? There's that conversation. And then there's also the conversation of token holders generating revenue and fee sharing. So there's kind of like the step one and then the step two. So in terms of step one, right now, I am not a lawyer, believe it or not, but right now it appears that would be problematic in the eyes of, I don't even know who cares about that, SEC, IRS, whomever, right?
Getting dividends, right?
A DAO entity, a DAO is not a real thing. It's not like an actual, it's just a group of people that all just decided to re-architect the financial infrastructure with their friends. And then they do that online, and then they use that made up token to go and make more made up token. And then someone goes, hey, no, you can't do that. So at what point are we going to be able to wrap that in a very user-friendly way that's a repeatable process so that the DAO can actually go out and operate like a business?
We could do it tomorrow. We could have done it 3 years ago. I'm really of the strong opinion that a lot of this stuff has been nonsensically delayed for boogeyman reasons, like to be a little kind of candid. I think a lot of folks just don't think the fee switch should get turned on, like some of the largest token holders. That's fine and valid. Hey, if you own Uniswap tokens fair and square, then you have the absolute right to vote with those tokens on whatever you think should happen. So be it. I just would think there's a non-trivial population who are saying that there's an issue with turning on the fee switch when they really mean that they just don't want to turn it on. The DAO can do it. Any DAO for that matter. We have many DAOs. Like Uniswap is not the only DAO that is contemplating turning on revenue. MakerDAO over here, once a New York-based foundation, generates huge amounts of revenue in the DAO and does MKR buybacks regularly, has been for a long time. So I don't know, I think there's a lot of folks in the ecosystem on the Uniswap side who think we're a kind of a special unicorn, and I agree, in many respects we are a special unicorn, but there are larger protocols generating more revenue that are doing things with their revenue and have a very similar status that Uniswap does. And for whatever reason, our DAO has not progressed at the rate at which I think a lot of other folks believe it, it should have progressed at this point.
So when I say the word Duna, what happens in your mind? Where do you go?
Yeah, I mean, this Duna has been talked about for a while. It happened, I think it was like last May-ish, maybe it was like April when it got passed. What, in the state of, was it Wyoming, right? Or
I believe so. Yeah. Yep. If you don't mind, I'm not too well read into what exactly that is. I've just been hearing that word tossed around a lot, and apparently it's a silver bullet solution that we're slow playing. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, so I'll give like the very high level explainer on Duna. And obviously, I'm not a lawyer, but anyone can go and Google this, for themselves. And there are quite a few pieces out there for people to read who do want to study up on it. But essentially, Duna is this new entity type that exists in the state of Wyoming for DAOs that would like to incorporate and have a legal entity exist. The idea of having this legal entity is that you can then say, oh, okay, like me DAO thing is incorporated in this place. I have a place where you can send mail to, and I have a person who represents the DAO for matters that the state or otherwise may, inquire in that place. And so for the first time, if this DAO is producing revenue and it's a structured entity, now we have a way in which, if necessary, we can pay taxes or do other business activity that would otherwise require an entity. That's kind of the high level explainer. So folks have been saying in Uniswap is that, oh, we need to become some sort of an entity type. There has been many other entity types that have been discussed before Duna as well. That essentially, this would like help us formalize Uniswap's existence. And then in the necessary instances where we do need to pay taxes, we have a clear and easy way to do it. But really the key bit of Duna that folks really want is the liability management and protection there. So what happens right now is kind of when you're mentioning before, why are more people not participating in stuff? Do we need legislative change in order to get folks to be more proactive about participating in DAOs? Right now, it's kind of not clear about who is responsible, and some of the activity that's happening in American courts has led folks to be concerned that if they make a forum post or if they vote on a proposal, that they can be held liable by the DAO's actions. It's kind of an outlandish thing, but that's the opinion of some folks. The thought is with Duna is that once you have this wrapper on it, then you would protect the liability of folks who are participating in the DAO. And instead, the DAO, you'd have this clear entity that an individual entity, government, et cetera, could go after if some wrongdoing was done or was thought to be have done. Yeah, that's my like very quick layman's explanation. I'm sure there's some folks listening who would disagree, but we'll go with that.
That's awesome to have that a little bit more context. I appreciate you sharing that. Now, philosophically speaking, bear with me here. Is that not a textbook compromise of decentralization? By putting kind of like when you have a foundation director, when you do an offshore entity and it's like one person that you've never met before that has your entire business in their hands. It's like, oh no, we're a decentralized protocol who the funds are controlled by one human being that I've never met that lives on an island.
Yeah, I would say it's pretty much impossible to govern a thing from outside of the thing itself, right? Like what is Uniswap? What is the governance of Uniswap? There exists a smart contract on chain. Their rules are in the smart contract that if you have the applicable number of Uniswap tokens, you can make a proposal. And once that proposal is made, then some other people with the tokens can vote on that thing. And this contract has the ability to change things like moving money in and out of the treasury, adding new fee tiers to pools, turning on fees. That was like your three functions. This is it. This is like all the DAO has access to. In theory, we can invent new contracts that the DAO can have ownership of, but that's it. It is, I think, a little interesting to be like, okay, if this Duna entity, or for that matter, any entity in any DAO is incorporated, what can they actually functionally do to the DAO if the DAO is considered these smart contracts? Like the answer is nothing. Like it's up to the token holders. The token, if whoever's in charge of that Duna entity or the entity in general wants the DAO to do something, they can yell into the void in hopes that the people listen. There's nothing there to actually functionally make them listen. I suppose we could modify the contracts to like change that such that they had like approval over it, but then like, yeah, to your point, at what point is this thing no longer decentralized and distributed?
It's kind of like the relationship between a certain labs company that shall not be named and the DAO of the protocol that same labs company works for. It's a little bit like that.
Yeah, a little bit, I would say, but at the same time, I have great respect for the Uniswap Labs team folks. I think they've
without a doubt, 100%. No,
yeah, I mean they've done great things for the ecosystem. No, I know you didn't mean it that way. I don't, but I do think like there's some folks who like feel like they should be doing more for the DAO than they are doing. I think it would have been beneficial if they had. Personally, my gripe with some of their actions is just like the lack of transparency. It'd be great if they kind of just said what they are going to do and what they aren't going to do, such that then if folks wanted to fill in the gaps around what they aren't going to do for the good of the DAO and the uni token holders, then that'd be a great thing to do. And sometimes we're left guessing. but they're a private business who's making their money, and they've done a great things for DeFi and whatnot.
More importantly, I think even they're just having to cover their ass. Like for the entirety of their existence, they have been fighting an uphill battle with administration and regulatory uncertainty to where they are very, very wise to keep everybody, I don't want to say in the dark, but they have no obligation to the DAO. They have no obligation to the token holders. They're completely separate things. And we do have to respect them for that. It is a little frustrating, obviously, from the point of view of...
I think it's just a matter of like, if we could get delegates and the folks who participate in the DAO to kind of flip the opinion of, we're going to trust and hope that they're going to do everything that we want them to do, even though like they're not mind readers. You can't even read everyone's minds and know what we want them to do. Instead, we should just assume that they're not going to do all the things we want to do. If they happen to do some of those things, fantastic. That's a welcome surprise. And we should continue to work on the things that are important to the DAO and to the token holders and what they vote on there, because the incentive structure is different. They think at the end of the day, like I'd imagine if they listened to this, or, they heard me say that to them, that they would completely agree that the DAO should do what the DAO thinks it should do, and that the incentives are different, and that's okay.
How is Labs, the DAO, and the foundation all related to one another?
I've been meaning to like make a nice graphic that I can point to and hold up. I've been telling myself I'm going to do this the last like 2 months, because I get this question like practically daily, if not like, maybe then every other day. Because it's confusing stuff, and I get it. To lay it out most plainly, we'll attempt, is you have the Uniswap Labs team, which is this like New York based organization, or American. These folks are the ones who beautifully developed the Uniswap V1 through V4 contracts, Uniswap X, working on Unichain now, etc. They have the Uniswap.org website. They have the Uniswap mobile app, the Uniswap extension. They own the IP rights to everything, all the trademarks, the full shebang. So they're the inventors of it and the owners of most of the IP. Then 2 years into kind of the creation of this, 3 years, the token comes out, and they say, hey, this Uni token exists to control the factory contracts, which give you the rights to turn on fees and manage the treasury. Here are the keys, and such the DAO was invented. So now you have these two organizations, the one that invented the whole thing and the new external ecosystem. Some years later, the Uniswap Foundation gets invented by the DAO. The DAO says it's time that we invent an organization that is focused on the DAO's needs, because the labs wants to focus on their own needs. So the foundation comes about post this, and now we have Devin, Ken, and the two leaders over there, and the rest of their crew, which I think is 12 or 15 folks. While they're there, they start giving out new grants to folks, teams like ourselves. You have the ecosystem of delegates, but they want to bring in more people building in the ecosystem, so then Oku gets its reward. And so we come in, and we're kind of exist as one of the first, I would say, service providers to the DAO. Since then, you've now had me come in and like they become a service provider. So yeah, generally speaking, you have Uniswap Labs, the inventor, the owner of the IP, the owner of the websites. They don't have to listen to the DAO. They're the ones who created the DAO, but the DAO now runs itself. And you have the Uni token holders who can make proposals as the protocol allows them to. And then you have the Uniswap Foundation, who reports to the DAO, and their job is to look after the interests of the DAO. And then, of course, the delegates, who represent the interests of token holders who delegate to them. So that's kind of the super high level, the service providers being like Oku and Tally and some other folks.
Okay, I appreciate that. I appreciate that explanation. It makes it a lot easier when you put it that simply.
I got to draw it out, though. I feel like even the explanation is kind of like long-winded and unnecessary.
Yes, I would love that.
And then I'd like a stamp of approval too from all the parties.
I'm pretty sure we could organize that. I'm pretty sure we could get everyone to write off on here's who everyone is and what they're doing and what you can say they're doing.
That is part of the
on chain.
That definitely is part of the reason why, in my opinion, DAO governance is so messy, is because you have, obviously, how you can watch C-SPAN, for instance. Technically, all bills you can go online and you can see who voted yes on what bill. For Congress, I'm saying, or Senate, whatever.
Yep.
And you can also go into these government buildings and you can actually sit there and watch as all the Congress people do absolutely nothing but filibuster. And so I'm just thinking it's a little bit problematic, because a lot of stuff in DAO governance actually doesn't happen in public. A lot of it is private conversations that are going on in the background efficiently, because obviously, like we talked about earlier, it's very inefficient to run public negotiations. If Putin and Trump were to try and broker a deal with Israel Palestine, like you can't do that on Twitter. You got to go in a dark room and you got to go smoke hookah and do perspective enhancing whatevers to, you know what I mean? Like that's not something you can just...
I mean, it's difficult to put all the cards on your table, be open to all the folks that can opine, the peanut gallery, etc. Yeah.
Right. So the problem with that asymmetric information is that a lot of it drops off, and people on the forums don't, and people that are trying to be active community members that maybe weren't first to the delegate race, they have no idea what's actually going on. And so there's all these different information silos that makes it very difficult to keep one's finger on the pulse. And so that is definitely one of the goals of our little growth program pilot, is to make more of a central information hub. And Getty, I would love to hear some advice from you. I know that you guys have done a tremendous job up to this point moving the DAO forward with different marketing initiatives. And I know you guys are actually, I think you're onboarding some new marketing folks as well, which is going to be great. But is there any advice that you would have to, if you're going to be running some sort of central marketing hub, what are the types of things that you want to see?
Yeah, I think on the marketing front, there's a lot that we as an organization have tried to do over the last 2 years. We don't have the funding that a lot of our competitors have in teams to do some of the more established avenues, I would say. You know, we're not funding newsletters with $100,000 a month pays and such. You know, we have to be a little more scrappy. Where I find our platform shines is when we can focus on a very particular niche, really sort down that demographic that we want to go after, and then try to connect with them personally. So it's like one of the reasons why, like on Oku, like we've always really tried to prioritize having really good like user support. So that way, if like any user comes to the platform, like that's an opportunity for us to like convince them that this is like the place where they should do their DeFi activity, whether it be swapping, bridging, on-off ramping, LPing on Uniswap, etc. And at the same time, we do a lot of like direct reach to like target markets, and like really target markets. I'm not using that term like generally, like we really try to target folks particularly and try to explain to them like, hey, we noticed you did this transaction on 1inch and we think you really find a better value if you did that on the Oku platform instead for X, Y, and Z reasons. You know, typically that, you know, we have our order routing system with 8 different systems integrated. If you're only on 1inch, you're not going to get the best quote. It's just objectively, you're not going to get the best quote. So we really found direct reach to be good. And then I think kind of like the last thing there is like we want to do more fun things. That probably is like the greatest miss that we've had as a team over the last 12 months is that we were too professional. I've like always kind of skewed that direction just because that's our tendency, but it's something that we're kind of rectifying, and we've got a lot of feedback that folks just like fun things and they just want things to be more fun and kind of playful. Even if they're moving millions of dollars in an instant, that's still like something they want.
Yeah, it builds culture, right? It's a lot more fun when doing the tough stuff and the professional stuff when you're having a good time about it and you're able to connect with other people. And it's that human element that I think is really missing for DAOs in general.
Truly, this industry is truly one of the most ridiculous industries. Like in terms of the actual people that you get to meet, the characters that you meet walking around the floors of ETH Denver, is like you'll have like a dude from Singapore in a suit that's just like business, and then you'll have like a furry that's like running around on the floor. The same they're like we're trading the same meme coins. It's the best thing. It's really something special.
Yes,
there's no other industry like ours, that's for sure.
Where clowns and business people collide. It's a blast. Okay, Getty, here's a fun one. If you could snap your fingers like genie in a bottle, you get one governance proposal passed, no questions asked, unanimous delegate vote, what would that be? What would that look like?
It's easy. It's to turn the fee switch on. You know, I'm a big believer that this thing should have been turned on long ago, and it's like the greatest unlock to happen in the DAO. It's going to represent a huge amount of revenue coming into the DAO if we turn that on in the correct fashion and we monetize pools. I really don't think LPs are going to leave in mass. I think the Uniswap protocol has done a great job building that infrastructure of building that LP infrastructure moat in its ecosystem, where there's really nothing else like it for most other dexes. And even so, I think it's important for us to like rip that band-aid off, monetize the thing. And if people do leave more than expected, then we should focus on why they left and strive to build a better product. But yeah, by far, that's the number one proposal. If I could snap my fingers, I would have done that as I tried to do it in the past.
And you said correct. You said to do it in the correct way, without getting too into the weeds. And I don't want to put you on the spot in case you don't have actual quantitative commercials on that. What do you think would be the ideal fee switch to turn on?
So the fee switch, how it's configured, so you can do it on a per pool basis. And you can choose whether you want to take anywhere between 1/10 of the LP fees being generated there. I think it's up to 1/4. It's my opinion that 1/5 is the happy middle ground there. 1/6 is something I think I'd be willing to compromise with as well. That's, kind of like right where you're looking around what was set up around the Uniswap V2 system as well. So I think like that, to me, there's a lot of folks who say we should just do the 1/10. And I think that's just kind of silly. If we're going to come all this way to finally turn this thing on, like let's turn it on in an appropriate fashion and get a nice amount of fees. And then from there, let's focus on how we can grow that pie. And, if folks do leave, how do we build a better product?
Okay. So a couple pieces of that. Well, first of all, I think I'd agree with the 1/5. I think that's in nature, that's literally, I think that's Pareto's number is like 20/80, right? So I think that's probably a pretty solid number. I think that's the Uber model. Uber and Lyft, I think they give their drivers 80%, they take 20. One issue that I have not heard a lot of people talk about, and it might just be because it's more of a derivative problem, it's kind of a downstream thing, but you remember in the show Silicon Valley when they're talking like, no revenue, like don't talk about revenue numbers, because the second that you actually realize the idea that this is a revenue generating thing, then you can put a multiple to the value of the underlying thing. So back of the napkin math, 20% of all LP fees, are we talking about millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions? What do you think that looks like?
We're talking about somewhere to the tune of like $70 to $120 million in like revenue to the DAO in a year.
Per year.
So yeah, obviously a lot of this comes down to like overall macro crypto sentiment, which drives overall volumes, right? We need trade volumes to go up. We need Uniswap's market share to continue to like hold steady or grow. So there's a few assumptions you're making there, but like, yeah, generally speaking, we're talking about like many tens of millions of dollars, if not in excess of $100 million. That being said, you'll see other people's numbers, and this is why you correctly pointed out, I said correct way to do this. You'll see other people's numbers who will forecast like $20 million revenue, because they're going to turn it on in a very isolated fashion. They're going to do it to the tune of the lowest fee tier. And then everyone's going to pat themselves on the back and say they did the job. And I'm like, you really did like 1/10 of the job.
Yeah.
Like this thing needs to be doing $100 million a year in volume. And if it's in revenue, and if it's not, then we need to be asking ourselves, how would we get it there?
I mean,
Otherwise, then we're going to see a collapse in the price, which I think no one wants. I certainly don't. We as GFX Labs hold a decent chunk of Uniswap tokens, not millions, but we hold some.
So now what would be then, let's say it's 100 mil. Let's say we get 100 mil coming into the DAO. What percent of that, what is the sentiment with yourself, maybe some of the other delegates you've talked about this, maybe the foundation? What is the sentiment around what percent should be split with the token holders?
Yeah, I think.
And then also, what is the requirement of the token holders in order to be eligible for that? Is it as simple as staking? I'm curious about that as well. I didn't want to forget that question.
Yeah, the Uniswap Foundation already proposed a staking system, which I think was nice. I think it's a good way to get folks to come in and delegate more votes too, and kind of solve the delegation and participation problem in governance as well, give them an additional incentive. So I imagine most of that will come through the staking side. The downside with doing the staking route is that you're kind of penalizing the dormant uni, and that like the only way to get the revenue is by staking, right? So anyone who doesn't stake, any uni that maybe is on an exchange that won't get stake, like it's kind of at a penalty. But I think it'd be nice to rectify some of the governance side of the things. As far as distribution goes, I really like the idea of what MakerDAO has done, and some other DAOs have adopted as well, where it's like, we want our treasury to have a certain number of cash assets in it. And once we're in excess of that point, then distributions will begin. So if we have, let's say, if the DAO wants to say we want $50 million in cash assets, and then after that, every single dollar that is in excess of 50 million, then we'll distribute that stuff. Because ideally we get off the point where, like, when the Uniswap Foundation or other proposals come up and they request Uni, rather than requesting Uni, we can distribute, treasury assets instead and not have to dilute token holders further. So yeah, I think that'd be like my preferred way to do distributions, is pick a number and say, whether that be like 30 or $50 million, get to that point, and then after that, make distributions happen regularly to staked folks.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think that's a really good place to start. Okay, a few little rapid fires just for fun.
I'll try to answer in less words.
If no, you don't have to answer in fewer words if you don't want to. You can go deep. But first one, that's if crypto goes to zero, would you try and rebuild what went to zero, or would you go get a real job?
I mean, I don't think crypto is going to go to zero. And I don't typically like dealing in hypotheticals that I just think are extremely unlikely like that until they come to be. But I mean, prior to crypto, my background was I was going to school for aerospace engineering, and I was very passionate about building small UAVs. I was like in high school, middle school, I was building lots of drones in my bedroom. That was like my thing. So I'd probably go back to building like small UAVs and kind of, autonomous vehicles and such. I follow a lot of that industry still in my free time, which is non-existent, but I follow it a lot because it's just super interesting.
Wow. I thought I knew everything about you, Getty. Not even close. That's really cool.
The dream is like over here. It's like if we can generate enough revenue someday and have some profits, like I can start a hardware engineering side of GFX Labs, and I can still do my autonomous robotics. Would be fun. I don't know. It's gonna be a while.
There we go.
I don't know. A couple more bull markets. I think we could do that. And,
yeah.
I would totally write I'd write an angel check into GFX hardware company, 100%. Yeah. No, that is super cool. Okay. Do you use if you use a hot wallet, which wallet do you use? What do you recommend? What's your favorite?
On desktop, I'm still using MetaMask because I'm a boomer. I should be using Rabby. I know it's bad.
Why is it bad? Why is it bad to use MetaMask?
It's just not. The UX is so much better on Rabby. I have a Rabby wallet for like when I have to test things, because we have I have like every wallet practically, because folks will report issues related to individual wallets on Oku from time to time. Rabby's like MetaMask is our top wallet. Rabby's the second most popular wallet on the platform, and then OKX wallet is the third most popular one. Rabby's fantastic. It's really just, MetaMask is very boomerish still. They've, credit to the team, I think they finally have woken up from their slumber, and the app is getting a lot better in recent time. But Rabby's still light years ahead. So if you're a new person, I would say go download Rabby.
Awesome. On that note, if you're a new person comment, I don't know how many new people are going to be ever listening to this podcast, but I did have a really fun concept that I ran by Austin, which is to every once in a while to have a guest on the podcast that knows almost nothing about DeFi, and just have it be like a very, very Web 2 focused for people listening. Because you go and try and listen to these DeFi podcasts, and they are so in the weeds that unless you are already in the weeds, you don't know what's going on. So there's not really like a fun, like a boomer asking questions.
Yeah,
from
That's
a
what we
dumb
need.
When I get on, when I do podcasts, I typically either like the presenter tells me, or I ask them about like, hey, are we trying to do this for like a normie audience or not? Because then I'll skew my answers to be a bit more like friendly and explanatory than otherwise.
That's probably best practice. And yeah, we're gonna figure out who our audience is.
I think my guess is it'll be folks who are already familiar with most of these concepts.
Probably so.
But maybe over time it becomes more basic, or maybe you start like a second podcast and you have a more friendly track, some educational content.
Or we just try our best to not speak in tongues and try.
It's hard because then folks
break it down.
who are in the weeds won't listen.
Right. Also true. And it's a little bit inauthentic also if you're trying to speak in a more dumbed down version, I think. So it's a tough line to walk for sure. Yep. What is give us some alpha. What kind of narratives are you excited about?
I think interop protocols are going to be a big thing in late 25 and like 26. There's so many chains. We don't have really many DeFi protocols that connect these chains yet. we spent a lot of time with the Wormhole folks. There's a lot of cool projects coming through that ecosystem that are going to be doing cross-chain borrow lending and other activity that's like beyond just like, oh, I want to bridge assets from point A to point B. Like that's fantastic and all, but I think interop protocols is like a very much untapped field that's going to be growing in size. On the Oku front, we're really trying to make the application substantially more like a traditional exchange. And I think we're going to have some huge advancements after the next ETH hard fork. We're going to be able to bring in account abstraction to the application and really make it feel a lot more like a centralized exchange and less like a DeFi experience. So I'm very excited about that in the second half of the year. And then, you have the new and upcoming borrowlend platforms. And I guess Morpho is not new per se, but they have their Morpho Blue, which is relatively new. And then, of course, Euler did their relaunch. We recently partnered with the Morpho folks to be their new kind of front-end partner and help them with their chain expansion. I'm very excited about how Morpho can play along with Uniswap. It's very similar in the sense that like anyone can come in here, start a borrowlend market for any asset and rapidly bootstrap it. I'm really excited for us to add that to the interface and get more folks exposed to that. And I think lastly, as far as interesting things go, I mean, obviously we're big into the Uniswap ecosystem. I'm keeping a very close eye on Fluid, which is Instadapp's, DEX protocol and borrowlend protocol, and seeing how that is going to progress at eating away at Uniswap's market share and seeing what lessons has the Uniswap DAO can learn from it. I've even floated on Twitter the idea that the Uniswap DAO should be taking a activist stake in that protocol before it gets too large and eats away at too much market share for Uniswap. So talking a bit of my bag there, I do hold an Instadapp bag and I hold a Morpho bag and the company holds a Uni bag. So, but I would also be lame if I didn't have bags of those things that I liked and thought was interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I think the conflict of interest disclosure is a little bit too much of a standard thing. I don't think anybody, unless people's bags are on the line and someone could get hurt from it. I don't think it's ever that necessary. The assumption is, I've invested in the thing that I'm talking about.
Exactly. I think like that's weird when people think the person who's talking about something doesn't own a bag of it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, of course, the thing I think is interesting and is like growing over the next year. Why would I not own a bag of that? Then otherwise, then I wouldn't really believe what you're saying because then you weren't putting your money where your mouth is.
Big time. Okay. Last little question. Where can the world of the Ungovernables follow Mr. Getty Hill and GFX and Oku?
Yeah, we're on like all the platforms. We're on X. My handle there is Getty_Hill. Oku Trade is our handle on Twitter as well. And we have Labs GFX. So it's backwards on Twitter, Labs GFX, if you want to follow us there. Most of the content we're posting is either from like my own handle or the Oku handle. The GFX stuff tends to be a bit more process or like us announcing new governance things that we're working on in initiatives. And then we're also very active on DBank as well for folks who are from that part of the world who like posting on DBank. I'm a big fan of that platform. Yeah.
Dude, you were a phenomenal first guest. We are so blessed. You made this really fun and easy. Yeah.
Well,
we didn't even get to talk about Unichain or V4. So I think we have to have you back in a month or two. Is that okay? Can we do that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Hopefully it's launched by then.
I really hope so. Yeah.
That sounds great.
Cool, guys.
Seriously,
well, yeah,
Getty.
thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun, and I'm happy to do it again soon. And I look forward to seeing more of the Uniswap ecosystem products come on here. Hopefully, you can get the foundation to come up as well, and some other folks. I'm sure that some of the delegates would be more than happy to come on as well. And I've got my homework here. I got to go make this graphic explaining all the different orgs and the land of.
I'm excited to see that.
Yeah,
Get it on
seriously,
chain.
Getty. Thank you. We'll wrap it there, guys. This is Ungovernable episode 1. Thank you, everyone, for joining.